Thank you for joining us today on the Relevance Rapport. If you are new to our podcast and web series, please don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell, and make sure to tune in for our next episode. Today, we are very excited to have Jonathan Miller, who is the appraiser extraordinaire for all things Manhattan tri-state region and really the authority on real estate. And Jonathan is an old friend. I want to say we go back maybe 20 years. Dating myself.
Probably.
But it's really great to have you here and have you join us. Welcome, Jonathan.
Great to be here. Appreciate it, Suzanne.
So are you at home in Connecticut, or where are you?
Yeah. I've been camped out since mid-March. We closed our office in mid-March and then work from home. And then I've been into the city. I've been into my office once and I've been in the city 3 other times to do appraisals. One of the things that happened during the lockdown was we don't just do appraisals for purchases or refinances for banks. We do a lot of litigation, and the courts were closed. And so when they started to open up, I broke my 34-year record of never having driven to an appraisal in my career, because in Manhattan, it's a bus or a subway or cab or Uber or whatever. And I actually drove on three different occasions, broke my streak. So I'm starting to, work on it another 34-year streak again.
Well, talk to us a little bit more about what all you offer at Miller Samuel. Most of us who are in the New York area, we've read your name. You're quoted frequently in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. I mean, any major publication who wants to cite an authority on the market, your name appears. But talk to us about what you do, because a lot of people don't know that you do offer more than just, look, it almost appears as if you're doing full-time media because you're so frequently quoted.
Right.
But you're doing a lot. So talk to us about what all Miller Samuel is doing.
Yeah. So Miller Samuel, we've been in business since 1986. We cover the New York City metro area for residential appraisals and consulting, a little commercial. We cover the boroughs and do a lot of work in the North Shore, in the Hamptons and Fairfield County and Westchester. And we've been, we do it for banks and like I said, not just what the consumer thinks appraisers do. We do. I considered myself to be pretty good at appraising. Our firm appraises hallway space in co-ops when two apartments are combining and they have to acquire the co-op, and you have to figure out shares and what's the market for the 8th floor at the end of the hall. Somebody on the 5th floor doesn't say, "Hey, I really want a chunk of that 8th floor," right? It's this sort of, it's a different type of market. And we do lots of expert witness testimony in court, and just a lot of oddball consulting. Hey, there's a Starbucks below my apartment that's improperly venting, and now my apartment smells like Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee, and that's all I smell. And you end up doing it in a litigation. Or sound. There's people on the floor above don't have proper coverage of carpet and they're tap dancing, and they won't stop. What's the impact of value? That sort of thing. Oddball to the regular old appraisal stuff.
Well, you're certainly the authority and able to find data on just about anything. I'm always amazed at your reports, your stats. You're also the one who does the quarterly reports for Element, right?
Yeah.
And other companies as well. And I'm always curious how you get such great data. It's probably very complicated, but can you just dumb it down for our listeners really quickly?
Yeah, it's really pretty straightforward. We rely on public record, but there's also data that we get just in the practice of valuation, in our relationship with different companies, Element being, a prominent one, being the largest, brokerage company in the region, and one of the largest in the country. And I think also too, there's just a lot of data out there that isn't recognized as important or appreciated or valued. Mm-hmm. And all we try to do is translate it into I guess the way to describe it is, and I think one of the reasons why we get a lot of media attention is because we're really not trying to paint a story other than what we think it is. So it's all about framing the story accurately. So one of the examples was in the beginning of the lockdown of the pandemic in New York. New York was the focal point of the world almost. I mean, I remember thinking, this is pretty scary. And then I had a friend of mine in West Texas, who's an appraiser. On a sidebar, I was president for a few years of a national appraisal organization, and so I have contacts, peers all over the country that we trade knowledge and war stories and things with. And he said, "Man, I'm in the middle of West Texas, and unlike Manhattan, we're never going to get the pandemic here." And of course, like 2 weeks later, they were the next hotspot. And it was just sort of this sort of learning thing. But the point is that that I in going through the pandemic, the narrative was, I call it like fleeing the city in air quotes, or exodus in air quotes. And what was weird to me was in the beginning of the lockdown, Manhattan had the most outbound. Initially, according to the New York Times, about 40% of people packed up and moved in the first month and a half. But yet we had the lowest infection rate of all the boroughs. Like the outer boroughs, like Queens and Brooklyn, had the highest infection rate in Staten Island, and they're very suburban-like. So the whole urban to suburban thing seemed deeply flawed. And so really a lot of it is, it's not the data, but it's interpretation, being able to frame the correct, narrative about what's actually happening, and there's no sort of confusion about that. Anyway, that's my take on the data itself.
So do you feel through this whole process that you've had a great deal of responsibility to just people in general who are so hungry for the data right now? I mean, I can imagine everybody was clamoring to get your attention. They need information, right? And so how was that?
Well, it was very exhausting. So early in the pandemic, probably around May, I remember one period where I did about, a dozen 1-hour Zoom presentations to different groups. I had no financial incentive. One was a builders association in Chicago. One was some other sort of construction trade group in Baltimore, where they just thought it would be interesting to talk because Manhattan was this focal point. And so I felt it was like my responsibility sort of to the citizens or something. I don't know. It was weird. I felt this weird, but I remember doing 12 1-hour presentations in 36 hours. And that's exhausting. I mean, it's much easier to speak in public in front of a live audience in me personally than it is. Zoom is hard because especially when you're talking to, one-on-one is great, but in person, you get a lot of sort of signs that the audience gets it or doesn't get it. Like, yes. For example, I teach market analysis of all things at Columbia, their grad program about once a year or every summer semester. And this year it was pushed to the fall, and then it ended up being 100% Zoom, or not 100%. Yeah, well, for me, it was 100% where I taught from my home. And I have 120 students for 2 hours. It's really fun to sort of, because then when they don't understand, you can zero in on it and figure it out. Mm-hmm. But in Zoom, it's just a bunch of little icons or pictures in little squares, and 120 students. They're like in Africa and China and all over Europe, all over the United States. And I think 20 were actually in the physical lecture hall where I was like on a big screen, like, sort of like George Orwell. And it was really hard. It's exhausting. So I can't wait to get back and, press the flesh, so to speak.
Yeah, I think we all feel the same way. I mean, this is exhausting. It takes a different kind of toll on you to
Right.
have to do everything virtually. And
Right.
you do miss the energy and the physical interaction with people. You wouldn't think it's a big deal, but I definitely think that people are going to be so excited to have coffees and lunches like never before. I mean, I
Oh,
remember getting burnt out on those, like, oh, please, another coffee
right.
and
So
lunch.
much.
And
Now
then,
it's just, you can't wait. I mean, one of the things are my sort of, my wife and I, and my wife is our CFO in our company, and co-founder and all that. We every Friday we had a lunch date at the local diner. Like I worked at home, for like the last dozen years on Fridays, and we would go to the local diner and just have lunch every Friday, no matter what. Like turn down speaking up, whatever it was. I never missed it ever. And so that was like this. It was like a weekly reset,
mm,
and we couldn't all of a sudden we couldn't do it. And it was really something I really missed. That's the first thing we're going to do. We both had our second shots, and we have like another couple of weeks before we're going to start venturing out. I mean, still with masks and all that, but just go to that diner and have a stupid lunch, and because we
yeah,
can.
some sense of normalcy. Yes,
Right.
definitely. So, well, I'm glad you're getting vaccinated, and I'm just wondering if you're planning to little by little creep back into the city, or because I'm talking
Yeah.
to different people, everybody's got different versions of what they think is going to happen to New York and the whole working situation. Are they going to be partially remote, partially in the city?
Right.
Do you have any insights on that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of thoughts. First, sort of the broader picture. My company, we have like a smattering of people that have been coming in all throughout this because they lived close to the office, and they might not have. They would rather alternate and not work with their spouse in a one-bedroom apartment, and they both have jobs. They
Right.
needed some sort of room to get out. And so we had a lot of that. But we are starting to, more and more people are coming back in as they're being vaccinated. And I miss the city deeply. So I live in Connecticut in the suburbs, but I've worked in the city since the mid 80s. I'm not a native New Yorker, but I just love everything about it. In fact, my sort of heart sort of swelled the other day. I was reading that on Bloomberg News that like the rat population has expanded, and I go, oh, the New York I love. Like this is it's calling me. So I do plan to start going there on a few days a week, sort of play it by ear. And I think that's actually one of the things that has been happening in terms of the housing market. And my sort of dad joke about this topic was, it's a V-shaped recovery, V for vaccine. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that what we've seen just in the last couple of weeks, and putting aside today's Johnson & Johnson pause of the vaccine, but just the general distribution was up to nationally, it's like 4 million a day, which was hard to imagine just a
Right.
few weeks or months ago, that rate. And I think that ends up being a reason for a faster return to the city. Prior to really this ramp up in distribution, the default company corporate answer was September.
Mm-hmm.
That's when companies are going to come back. And now we're starting to see a smattering of, hey, the summer, May, June. I'm not saying universally that's the number, but we are seeing it come back. And I think that will place immediate relief or give oxygen to like ground level retail, with office workers back. And I think it also will help the rental market, which has been crushed compared to the purchase market, which has been modestly impact relative to the rental market. I'm not saying it hasn't been impacted. And a lot of that is because the disparity between who was impacted by the economically and who wasn't is dramatically different. When you think about, the unemployment was significantly skewed against lower wage earners, especially retail, gig economy, that sort of thing. And mid-tier and upper tier, yes, there were furloughs and layoffs and job cuts, but nowhere near on the same scale. So that's why the sales market has been only modestly hit in Manhattan, and the rental market has been really hit, although we're seeing some signs of stabilization. Anyway, that was a very long-winded answer to a simple question.
No, it was a good answer. Well, I, like you, have been back into the city. I also live in the suburbs. And I always say that where we live in the suburbs, it's the best of both worlds, because when it's not a pandemic, I get my city fix. I get to go in and get my jolt of energy. New York makes me come alive, and it really drives me. And you feel like you're in the race.
Caffeine.
It is like caffeine. It is adrenaline and energy, and you feed off of that. And so I miss that. And I always said, if I had to be 100% in the burbs all the time, I don't know if I would have the same oomph. And then I also know that I used to live in the city, and I do also have appreciation, like you, I have a family. So I like the space, the yard, the good schools. So I think that the world is now just catching on, Jonathan, to what we knew all along, which is a little bit of burbs, a little bit of city.
Yeah, a little bit of both.
Get a little bit of both, get a little bit of balance. Especially if you're, 40 plus, it's the place to be able to quickly zip in, have those meetings.
Yeah, mobility. It's all about mobility. And actually, that's one of the reasons why Manhattan had the most outbound, according to the New York Times. I think I referred to this a little while ago. And so, the wealth and mobility of Manhattan enabled more people to leave sooner, which is also the same reason why they're slow to return. So when you think of the New York City metro area, I cover for Douglas Elliman, I cover about 36 different housing markets around the US. We appraise in New York Metro, and we cover for Elliman, New York Metro, but we cover 14 or so markets in Florida, Houston, Colorado, or Aspen, Colorado, Southern Cal. And it's been fascinating to see the sort of the urban to suburban relationship. And everybody wrote off the cities initially, when actually in New York City, Brooklyn and Queens are behaving just like the suburbs. They're booming. They were booming all along. It was Manhattan, which was sort of the representative of the urban, which wasn't true. And actually in markets like in Florida that we cover, the initially coming out of the lockdown in Florida, it was all single family. It wasn't multi, like condo, because of close quarter. The assumption of the concern about safety, et cetera. And that only lasted till about September. And then after that, it was equal. There was no pattern emerging of, hey, condos are bad, single families good. That went away pretty quickly as people got their arms around the crisis and, sort of what to do or what not to do. Right.
Well, it's all really helpful, and we need people like you to guide us through this, because nobody else has lived through this. I mean, and you have lived through a lot of real estate cycles. That's very different than a pandemic, but I'm sure that you're better than most at anticipating trends. I mean, really looking at things are still kind of cyclical, even though this is an unprecedented hiccup.
Right.
So,
although all my children, I have 4 sons, they all say that I'm kind of square. So I don't know if I'm good at anticipating trends, but what can you do?
But you're cool, Jonathan. We have the Pixies in common. We have musical taste. I know you're gonna be one of the first ones out there seeing live music, and you're still cool. You're still very cool.
Well, I will make them watch this interview and yes, so we get external confirmation.
And my kids too, which my son tells me I have to say, hit that bell to subscribe. The terminology is hit that bell.
Hit that bell, really?
And yeah, there's a certain way I'm supposed to say it. He watches more podcasts than I ever will in my lifetime. He is addicted to YouTube. So they're schooling us now, Jonathan. That's what's happening.
I definitely feel it. I feel it for sure.
Well, so for if you were to rewind your career and talk to your younger self, I know you've really had a great entrepreneurial journey. But I'm sure you've learned a lot along the way, as we all have. And I'm curious what you would talk to your younger self about, and really kind of some of your lessons learned to how you've gotten to where you are today. And then I know you're creating new things for the future as well. Do you have any lessons that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Besides the usual, like go to work early and often and all that stuff, I think I didn't realize the power of neutrality. And what I mean by that, I don't mean like, not having an opinion about anything, but, and so that's really helped me in the sense that when things are bad, I say they're bad, and when things are good, but it's not without context. There's a difference between like saying things are bad and like, having flares go off in the background and like pictures of the devil and like we're all going to die and it's a dystopian hellscape, which is what it felt like in the early days of the pandemic. To be measured and balanced and credible and admit when you're wrong and all that sort of thing. And I didn't appreciate how powerful that is, because that's really been my story in terms of, people coming to me for information. That's really all it's been. There's never been like a master plan. And actually, I recently, the last 4 or 5 years, I have been very outspoken in my own profession, to the point of sort of openly criticizing regulators and our largest trade group, and doing it in a constructive way, and it has affected some change, but not nearly what I'd like. But I find that to be very empowering, because it's almost like, this is very strange to say, it's almost like you can get extra credit in life if you're honest, but not honest. I mean, honest in the sense that there's always context associated with it. You say the sky is blue. Okay, I'm honest, right? But, what does that mean? I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's the way I sort of like to operate. And it really it works because, first of all, it's how I think about things. And then also, if you want to affect change, you have to, people have to understand what the challenge is or what the problem is. And you have to be very, clear about what those are. Anyway, that's my.
Well, I couldn't agree more, Jonathan, because what you've built is an authentic, credible brand, and you are at the center of that brand, right? And so people know they can come to you for trusted information. And I think that's a huge challenge that we're seeing now with the changing media landscape. The lines are being very much blurred between a credible source of information and not, an uncredible source. And so,
And actually, just to interrupt, that's actually, you've hit sort of, one of the most important aspects of anything is the source matters. So when you read a source, sources have biases. Even the ones that you love, the ones that you hate, everything has a sort of bias built in, and you kind of always struggle to sort of take the read from it and understand where it comes from. And I'm reminded of there's a writer. I don't know. He's more of a visualization god. His name is Edward Tufte. He's a former architecture professor at at Yale, and he's written a series of books. I've taken a couple of seminars. Basically the theme is envisioning information. The idea of how to present information in a way that's not misleading, which, the whole saying lies, damn lies, and statistics. It's such a thing, and it can be so misleading. And one of the things that he has always said is that if a chart or a visualization like you read in a paper, a magazine, or on the web doesn't have a source, it's a lie. Like don't rely on it, don't share it, don't use it, and understand what the source is. And if you do that, 9 times out of 10, I think you're in good shape.
So true. And I find that more people are getting completely bifurcated information based on their political leanings.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's like, well, which version of the truth are you looking at? And we are no longer looking at the same information in a lot of cases.
Right. The information, yes, it's like 2 different data sets or something weird when it's not. So,
so how do we, well, I mean, I went to journalism school and I'm on the PR side, but I still feel a huge responsibility that PR people also have to hold to very stringent ethical standards. And that's why journalists come to us for credible information as well. And sifting through all the crap. I mean, honestly, there's just so much crap information out there that that in itself is a full-time job. So that's why I think when people find a trusted source like yourself, they glob onto it. They want to keep quoting you, keep citing you, because they know time and time again, it's correct. It's been checked and checked again. And you are not, as you say, not invested in the outcome. So one of the things
actually, I don't care what the outcome is. That's the part that is hard to do. You have to, you really have to not care about that. I'll give you an example would be, we do a lot of litigation, like matrimonial. Real estate is the biggest asset. And every time I would do an appraisal, say I had inspected a Park Avenue apartment, a big Park Avenue, and there's little kids there and a nanny, and I walk out, that always, crushes me because, I'm a dad and all that, but I always call my wife, I've done this for years, and tell her I love her, when because I still have to, I have to sort of like transfer the emotion onto my own life. And because I have to make sure that no matter who's at fault or whatever, I'm only seeing certain optics. It's not my job. My job is to not care about any of that and come up with what is the neutral look at this. And that's always hard to do. It's very hard. It's very hard. Maintaining neutrality is always a challenge because we're human beings and we're prone to bias. So
you have to almost compartmentalize from what you're saying. It sounds like
yes,
compartmentalize the information and detach emotionally. That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, because it must be really hard to deliver bad news. And it's been a lot of bad news lately.
Yes, exactly. And actually, then it's really funny because sometimes you can overthink, and there's in the beginning, new leasing activities down 92% year over year, like insane numbers back during the lockdown. I mean, just insane. And you start doing that for a while, and and you can see it's improving now. It's just not as horrible as it was last month. It's just horrible, not doubly horrible, right? And you get through that. And then when things start getting better, I start questioning myself, am I being way too optimistic here? Like what, I was really comfortable with things really being terrible. And now all of a sudden, like they're bad, but not terrible. What am I doing wrong? Am I not being neutral? And so there's this constant like battle. But that's what you have to do.
Are you optimistic about New York's future?
Oh yeah, I'm very optimistic. My my parents are from Connecticut. I grew up largely in the Washington, D.C. area, not a native New Yorker, but I've been in New York since 85. But I remember my grandfather in Connecticut used to tell me when I was living in, we were growing up in Maryland outside of D.C., he'd say, Jonathan, if you're not working in New York, then you're just camping out. And so, then after, being here since the mid 80s and going through 9/11 and the Lehman moment and, and pandemic and, lesser but serious matters in between, I've always been amazed at how quickly the market recovers, and many were on the bandwagon initially. And so that's maybe, that's a bias I have to always fight. But on the other hand, it's just, the city is just too awesome. I think, I lived in the city for about 5 or 6 years before we moved to the suburbs, and I loved it. With kids, it becomes like another layer of complexity that I don't know if I would love. My wife was pregnant when we moved with our first, when we moved to the suburb, or with our second, when we moved to the suburbs, but our oldest was still too young and to go to school or anything. And so it is complicated, but just like you had said earlier, being able to sort of have the best of both worlds, there's a reason for that. And the reason is, it's quirky. It's not generic. It's not bland. And, my whole life, before I moved to New York, I'd grown up in essentially suburbs of cities, like the suburbs of Detroit, the suburbs of Chicago, the suburbs of Washington, D.C. And now I'm in the suburbs of of New York in Connecticut, but the city, I can't imagine being not linked to it in some way throughout my professional and my, career and my personal life for the rest of my life.
I feel the same. And you know what? I think a lot of people who are saying New York is over, you're never going to have to come back in. You know what? They're underestimating New Yorkers. They're underestimating all the people who can't imagine living anywhere else, and how resilient all of New York is. And, I get to work with some of the best real estate clients in the world who are building New York City. And I've spoken with some of them, and they've said to me, we really just need to all decide when we're all going to come together, cohese, and agree that now's the time we're coming back. So why don't we just all agree to come back, and then it's over, right? Let's just do that.
Yeah.
Let's set a date, Jonathan. Let's do it.
Okay, fair enough. I'll pick a date on my calendar. Well, the way to think of it is, so New York, Manhattan right now has an optics problem. The optics are that, the cable news panning video shot of Times Square and all the boarded up buildings and garbage or whatever, is the optic of Manhattan. But as I said, I went into the city 4 times. 3 of them were to the Upper East Side, residential neighborhood. I'm not saying it was normal. Everybody's wearing a mask. Even the people unloading the trucks, it felt safe. And a lot of people walking around, people, dining outside. So I think part of it is an optics problem. And the optics are that the residential neighborhoods, I'm not saying they're thriving, but it's completely a different image than what you see in the central business districts, because the buildings are 80 to 90% empty.
That's right.
And therefore there's no oxygen to support the retail. Therefore you have garbage and home, you have quality of life issues for many. And that is the problem. And I think a lot of that changes or goes away when companies call people back. They're just not going to call them back 100%. So another way to think of it is, someone like myself, for the last dozen or so years, I've been working at home on Fridays, my Friday afternoon diner, lunch with my wife and all that. And And so, you think of that and say, okay, so the person that is normally working 5 days in the office is probably going to work 4, 3, or 2 days in the office, right? And so the way I think of it is, you have like 5% of the people before the pandemic that were remote, and that doubles or triples, right? And everybody thinks that means that everybody's working remote. No, that means 10 or 15% are working remote, 100% remote. The other, and the next 50% are going to be the hybrid people like myself that, I'm probably going to be working 2 to 3 days in the office going forward, forever. Not forever, but, for a long period of time. And so is my staff. But it's not going to be 5 days a week in the office with my staff. Most of my staff are going to be working, 3 to 4 days, probably 3 on average. And that's the change, that's the change that we're going to go through. And so the optics right now aren't what they're going to be when those office buildings go from 80 to 90% empty to like 75% full or 80% full. They're not going to be 100%. They're going to be, because there's still going to be that component. And that's why commercial real estate is much more challenged in the future because of, this Zoom or remote working phenomenon, which became ubiquitous in 24 hours when it might have taken a decade, right?
Right. Well, we work from home on, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and so I think a lot of it, so right now we're in this sort of, I don't know what you call it, but like this cauldron of like figuring out where we are and how it's going to play out. But it's not, right now we're at peak Zoom. I like to say this to make me cool. We're at peak Zoom. This is not how it's going to be. It's going to be somewhere between where we are now and where we were pre-COVID. It's going to be somewhere in between. And that's what we're figuring out right now. We don't really know because human behavior is sort of, this big mystery.
Right. Well, we were also working remotely on Fridays. We had all of our staff rotating which Fridays they got to work from home throughout the year. Started out in the summer. Then we were like, you know what, this can work. This can work throughout the year. I agree with you. I think people are just going to maybe tack on another day or two for some staff, make it a little bit more flexible, especially for those who want to have the ability to live a little further out from the city. But I also, like you, I'm seeing where some team members, they would rather be in the office than in their small little Manhattan apartment. So for me, I was just saying, as long as you're available to come in when a client needs you, that's my request, because the clients are not going to get less demanding. I do not think that's going to happen in my world.
In fact, they might even be more demanding, at least in the short term, for sure. No, I totally agree. And, the other thing to keep in mind, that in the backdrop of all this is that, not to sound too wonky here, but I mean, with all the stimulus coming into the economy, I've heard people describe the next couple of years potentially as the roaring 20s, because GDP is, depending on the forecast, is going to 6-7%, triple what it should normally is. And the following year, it's going to be like 4 or 5%, double what it normally is. I mean, and that's going to have, that's going to fix a lot of problems that we have right now. So I think, for many naysayers about, we're going to, New York is a dystopian hellscape. I think that they're not really looking critically at where things appear to be going based on what we know at this moment.
Right. And I also think right now there's a bit of a feeding frenzy with recruitment and trying to use stimulus money, and they're wooing employees with, you can work anywhere. And I'm like, let's see where that goes in a year, because
it won't be, especially when the cost of living starts to, I've already, know a few CEOs who've said, like somebody wants to live in Minnesota full time. They're not going to collect the same salary. there's going to be cost of living. We're already seeing that in California with the tech workers that have, moved to other parts of the country out of San Francisco. That's already being done.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not as, it's not as straightforward as what is being painted.
Yeah, definitely. So what is next for you, Jonathan? Can you give us any scoop on what else you're working on?
Well, I'm trying to write a book. So I'm working on that.
Great.
I'm really in the early stages, so I don't want to imply that it's like half done. My wife has been like, giving me grief because this has been going on for like 15 years. And I feel like now, I didn't think I'd be this busy, during the pandemic. Like we were actually, our company in the first 2 months were down 70%. No, I'm sorry, 90%. And really by like, early June, we woke up and then we end up being like 150%, right? So it kind of comes out in the wash, but your stress level and your, just being burned out, really, you have to be careful. And so I was, thinking, oh, this would be a good time. And so anyway, it's going to be a nonfiction, and it's going to be sort of maybe what we've been talking about here in terms of the way to think about things. And then I'm involved in about 5 or 6 startups. I've been really active in that in the last few years, and some of them are, coming to be. And so I'm not leaving, or I'm going to continue to do what I do as long as I can. But there's going to be, some other challenges and fun stuff I just can't talk about it because I'm on NDA. So there's not really much content or fodder for you. But the excitement that, I think the exciting thing is that there's just lots of cool stuff, an opportunity that will be for many of us over the next 4 or 5 years as this sort of economy explodes. And with massive change comes opportunity. And that's what I'm, excited about.
I agree. And I love that you're investing in tech startups. And I'm hearing more and more that real estate and tech, they're not so different. They're just merging. And there are lots of opportunities to bring tech in more and more into the conversation. And as you say, there's just this huge pivot going on where we're learning to embrace technology as we go forward. This is a moment to pause and really think, how do we do things smarter? How can we reinvent ourselves? And it does present an opportunity. And that's why I love having optimists and problem solvers like you on the show, Jonathan, because while you are neutral, in your heart, you're an optimist, and I know it. So yeah, no, you gutted me emotionally there. So, but I don't disagree. So, well, thank you. I really have appreciated having you on, and I learned a lot. I look forward to the book. I would love to be a fly on the wall while you're writing that. You have been in some of the most interesting conversations around real estate and Manhattan and the tri-state area, and just really worked with all the titans and all the biggest media players. So I'm sure you've got great intel coming into that book. So I look forward to it. And thank you very much for taking the time today. Really,
I'm very happy to have joined you. I appreciate being able to have a nice conversation.
Thank you.